this is Christina Barr. You're watching Black Tea News. Hello, welcome to Black Tea News. I'm your host, Christina Barr, and today we're going to be reading this article from the Free Press about a whistleblower who, it's titled, "I thought I was saving the trans kids, now I'm blowing the whistle." So there are things in this article that made my mouth drop reading it, even though someone on TikTok had previewed it. I had seen it making its rounds around Twitter, and then I saw it on TikTok, and some people talked about it. And but actually reading through it with some things that I hadn't heard, just really crazy stuff what we're doing to our young people, but not just young. I mean, I guess a lot of these folks are young, but gender dysphoria used to be something that was more swayed, at least from what medical professionals say, used to be swayed more toward young men, and now it's swayed toward way in the direction of young women. And there's even like accusations of them giving people stuff to castrate them. So we're going to go through this article. I'm not doing a long intro today. I also want to talk about the train derailment in Ohio. It is a very unreported story. I hadn't really heard much throughout the week about it. And I have not heard a peep out of the transportation secretary. I'm not saying he hasn't said anything, but I did search the Department of Transportation for any news, and I did search his Twitter feed. There's oh, we did this in this other state today, fluff kind of stuff. And I'm like, this is really interesting. So I want to talk about that today. Hopefully we'll be toward the end. And I don't want to go over today, so hopefully it doesn't take too long to get through this article, but I do want to go through the whole thing. So before we jump into it, I want to encourage you guys to go to blackteennews.com, check out different content on the website, different articles, different videos. First thing you see at my website is going to be the splash page for this book. Of course, God is blatantly against abortions. You guys can go ahead and pre-order that on ebooks, or you can, if you want a paperback, you can just sign up and let you know when that is available for paperback. So I'm very excited for that to come out and for folks to read that. I also have other books you guys can check out. I have a historical fiction fantasy series, imagine like X-Men but meets the Civil War kind of era. So that's available on Amazon. Just search my name, Christina L. Barr, and there's lots of books that you'll be able to find on Amazon. I have 15 that are published. Only one is nonfiction at the time. All my other books are fiction. So I write a bunch of different stuff. I got stuff for kids chapter books and mostly young adult fiction stuff. But go ahead and check me out. If you go to blackteennews.com, hit the merchandise button, there's a banner that'll take you to my book website. So you guys can find me that way. But otherwise, go ahead and check out other merch that I actually have on my website that you guys can get and purchase for yourself. So if you would also like to support blackteennews.com, go to the website, hit the donation button, and leave a donation, whether it's a small gift. I appreciate that. If it's a larger gift, very much appreciate it. It costs a stream, run my website, do different filters. And when I come up with different kind of fancier videos, I just traveled to March for Life, got some videos about that. I did a chat with one of my gold sponsors, and they very much appreciated my content and stuff I brought back and information. And so they really appreciate the report. And so I'm glad that people who sewed into that appreciate what I did. So if you would like to do that, God bless you. Otherwise, I thank you guys for liking, for sharing, subscribing, supporting. So God bless. I think someone said they didn't know that I write. So yeah, God, I've been writing for a long time, basically since I got out of high school. And for those of you who don't know how long ago that it was, I'm 33, gonna be 34 this year. So yeah, we're all growing up, aren't we? So let's jump into the story. I'm not gonna start with a meme. I do have a pop culture story that I want to share at the very end if there's time. I'm not even going to talk about it in case there's not time. I just want to jump into this article. So, from where I'm reading on my computer, I need some glasses, but I got it really big so I can see. I wonder if you guys can see this better than I can, but we're going to read this. This is from the Free Press. Um, I thought I was saving trans kids. Now I'm blowing the whistle. There are more than 100 pediatric gender clinics across the US. I worked at one. What's happening to children is morally and medically appalling, by Jamie Reed. I'm a 42-year-old St. Louis native, a queer woman, a politically left of Bernie Sanders. My worldview has deeply shaped my career. I have spent my professional life providing counseling to vulnerable populations, children in foster care, sexual minorities, the poor. For almost 4 years, I worked at the Washington University School of Medicine Division of Infectious Diseases with teens and young adults who were HIV positive. Many of them were trans or otherwise gender nonconforming, and I could relate. Through childhood and adolescence, I did a lot of gender questioning myself. I'm now married to a trans man, and together we are raising my two biological children from a previous marriage and 3 foster children we hope to adopt. All that led me to a job in 2018 as a case manager at the Washington University Transgender Center at St. Louis Children's Hospital, which had been established a year earlier. The center's working assumption was that the earlier you treat kids with gender dysphoria, the more anguish you can prevent later on. This premise was shared by the center's doctors and therapists. Given their expertise, I assumed that abundant evidence backed this consensus. During the 4 years I worked at the clinic as a case manager, I was responsible for patient intake and oversight. Around 1,000 distressed young people came through to our doors. The majority of them received hormone prescriptions that can have life-altering consequences, including sterility. I left the clinic in November of last year because I could no longer participate in what was happening there. By the time I departed, I was certain that the way the American medical system is treating these patients is the opposite of the promise we make to do no harm. Instead, we're permanently harming the vulnerable patients and our care. So just going to add a bit of commentary. I'll try not to do a ton, but I thought that line was interesting because I mentioned in my book, of course, God is blatantly against abortion. I do talk about do no harm, and um, I understand people aren't going to like this crossover too much, but I made the line. I said that harm is now a matter of perspective, and there's so many people who are going forward gung ho with things because it meets their ideology, not because it meets the science or ethical standards at all. It's just so much. This is the way I think the world should be, and so we're going to do it. And a lot of it is ideology. Some of it is political benefits, and some of it's just money. It's always about the money. I think they always say that in Die Hard. Like, um, it's always about the money. But maybe not always. Sometimes about the ideology, and people get stuck on preserving that. But when money backs ideology, and ideology can be lucrative, uh, they mix, and sometimes terrible things can happen, because when they do this to children, they do create lifelong clients of big pharma, people who are dependent upon this stuff, in which this article will get into. So yeah, do no harm. It's like that's totally thrown out the window. Today I'm speaking out. I'm doing so knowing how toxic the public conversation is around this highly contentious issue, and the ways that my testimony might be misused. I am doing so knowing that I am putting myself at serious personal and professional risk. I assume she means how her testimony will be used, because she's a very left-wing person, and she understands that the right is going to pounce. And so even at all that risk, professionally and politically, because obviously right-wing people are pouncing, um, she still felt compelled to put this out. Almost everyone in my life advised me to keep my head down, but I cannot in good conscience do so, because what is happening to scores of children is far more important than my comfort, and what is happening to them is morally and medically appalling. Soon after my arrival at the Transgender Center, I was struck by the lack of formal protocols for treatment. The center's physician co directors were essentially the sole authority. At first, the patient population was tipped toward what used to be the traditional instance of a child with gender dysphoria, a boy, often quite young, who wanted to be a girl. Until 2015 or so, a very small number of these boys comprised the population of pediatric gender dysphoria cases. Then, across the Western world, there began to be a dramatic increase in a new population, teenage girls. Many with no previous history of gender distress suddenly declared they were transgender and demanded immediate treatment with testosterone. So this is a bit about like Abigail Schreier wrote a book, Irreversible Damage, when parents reached out to her and wanted someone to look into the social contagion of gender dysphoria. And it is something that's sweeping a lot of young women. There have been stories. I've seen so many stories of young women who have detransitioned, but they self-diagnosed. They got radicalized on things like Tumblr, places like that, where they hear like, oh, maybe I'm this, and they had other sort of issues, whether it was other sort of mental health issues or just internalized misogyny or whatever. They self-diagnose, they get hormones and other things very easily, and then at some point they realize they made a mistake. And she's going to speak to the mistakes that people made, and the harm that was done, and realizing that they've done harm to people. But yeah, this is a recent wave. um I've done a couple videos on Dylan Mulvaney, and someone said, "You're just sounds like you're just a hater." I'm like, I don't hate this man. I hate like the ideology. I hate, that. I mean, he said he wants it to be legal to call him a man, so I mean, I definitely hate that sort of like threat of censorship and how these people are trying to push this stuff forward. But I think I'm more disgusted with society as a whole. That's like, why are these big organizations and levers of power really, really, really pushing this? And she's gonna get into this article about why she really, really decided to step forward, because someone in our government decided to push propaganda and lies regarding this issue, and that's what made her say, I have to pursue this. So we have a whole system that's dedicated to this ideology, uplifting it, protecting it, plastering it everywhere. And you're not crazy because you notice. So let's continue. I certainly saw this at the center. One of my jobs was to do intake for new patients and their families. When I started, there were probably 10 such calls a month. When I left, there were 50, and about 70% of the new patients were girls. Sometimes clusters of girls arrived from the same high school. This concerned me, but didn't feel I was in the position to sound some kind of alarm back then. There was a team of about 8 of us, and only one other person brought up the kinds of questions I had. Anyone who raised doubts ran the risk of being called a transphobe. The girls who came to us had many comorbidities: depression, anxiety, ADHD, eating disorders, obesity. Many were diagnosed with autism or had autism like symptoms. A report last year on a British pediatric transgender center found that about 1/3 of the patients referred there were on the autism spectrum. Frequently, our patients declared they had disorders that no one believed they had. We had patients who said they had Tourette syndrome, but they didn't. They had tic disorders, but they didn't. They had multiple personalities, but they didn't. The doctors privately recognized these false self diagnoses as a manifestation of social contagion. They even acknowledge that suicide has an element of social contagion. But when I said the clusters of girls streaming into our service looked as if their gender issues might be a manifestation of social contagion, the doctor said gender identity reflected something innate. To begin transitioning, the girls needed a letter of support from a therapist. Let me just interject again. To just highlight that they do treat gender dysphoria today different than they do many other conditions. So it's interesting that she notes that they're willing to say other things have an element to social contagion, but they just want to dismiss that gender identity has an element to it. To begin transitioning, the girls needed a letter of support from a therapist, usually one we recommended, who they had to see only once or twice for the green light. To make it more efficient for the therapist, we offered them a template for how to write a letter in support of transition. The next stop was a single visit to an endocrinologist for a testosterone prescription. That's all it took. When a female takes testosterone, the profound and permanent effects of the hormone can be seen in a matter of months. Voices drop, beards sprout, body fat is redistributed, sexual interest explodes, aggression increases, and the mood can be unpredictable. Another thing I heard, testosterone will like help. Women are just having naturally more anxiety than I guess men do, and with that testosterone, it alleviates some of that. So a lot of people, when they get on those hormones, they'll feel like, they're doing great, they're doing pretty good, especially with that the anxiety lesson. But that doesn't mean that there's not something wrong transforming in your body, even though they might have that high of not feeling just female anxiety, I guess. And I'm not saying all women have anxiety. Some women definitely have it more than others. And I'm not saying that men don't have it either. I'm just adding that tidbit. Our patients were told about some side effects, including sterility. But after working at the center, I came to believe that teenagers are simply not capable of fully grasping what it means to make the decision to become infertile while still a minor. Which people don't give hysterectomies to women unless they're like upper in age or have had a couple kids, because of complications or whatever that might occur. But they also don't want women to regret or have, let's say, be upset that they can't have kids. Someone was complaining to me about it today, and they're like, instead of fighting for abortion, why don't you fight for, women be able to get hysterectomies? I'm like, doctors have free will. What do you want me to do about that? Because doctors aren't your slaves. Like, you can advocate why you feel like you're able to have that, but I can't. What do you want me to do? Petition the government and make the doctors do it? I don't think that's ethical. People can disagree with that, but I just don't. They're not your slaves. They're there to do a job, to do no harm, and if they don't feel that's the right thing to do, and especially if it's elective like that, I don't know what else you want me to do about it. So many encounters with the patients emphasized to me how little these young people understood the profound impacts changing gender would have on their bodies and minds. But the center downplayed the negative consequences and emphasized the need for transition. As the center's website said, left untreated, gender dysphoria has any number of consequences, from self-harm to suicide. But when you take away the gender dysphoria by allowing a child to be who he or she is, we're noticing that goes away. The studies we have show these kids often wind up functioning psychosocially as well as better than their peers. There are no reliable studies showing this. Indeed, the experiences of many of the center's patients prove how false these assertions are. So they're not well adjusted or better adjusted when they go through this process. So noting that there's some propaganda associated with this. Here's an example. On Friday, May 1st, 2020, a colleague emailed me about a 15-year-old male patient. Oh dear, I'm concerned that the patient does not understand what bicalutamide does. I responded, I don't think that we start anything honestly right now. It explains what it is. I think I can click on it. And nah, sorry, my screen shared. It didn't share it the way that I wanted to. Sorry. It's a medication used to treat metastatic prostate cancer, and as one of its side effects is that it feminizes the bodies of men who take it, including the appearance of breasts. The center prescribed this cancer drug as a puberty blocker and feminizing agent for boys. As with most cancer drugs, bicalutamide, I'm not saying that right, but we'll keep going, has a long list of side effects, and this patient experienced one of them, liver toxicity. He was sent to another unit of the hospital for evaluation and immediately taken off the drug. Afterward, his mother sent an electronic message to the transgender center saying that we are lucky her family was not the type to sue. How little patients understood what they were getting into was illustrated by a call. I can't imagine. Maybe they knew that it wasn't going anywhere, but somebody doing that to your kid. So um, that's awful. But there's other things. How little patients understood what they were getting into was illustrated by a call we received at a center in 2020 from a 17-year-old biological female patient who was on testosterone. She said she was bleeding from the vagina. In less than an hour, she had soaked through an extra heavy pad, her jeans, and a towel she had wrapped around her waist, and the nurse at the center told her to go to the emergency room right away. We found out later this girl had intercourse, and because testosterone thins the vaginal tissues, her vaginal canal had ripped open. She had to be sedated and given surgery to repair the damage. She wasn't the only vaginal laceration case we heard about. I think that's when my mouth dropped. The other girls were disturbed by the effects of testosterone on their clitoris, which enlarges and grows into what looks like a microphallus or tiny penis. I counseled one patient whose enlarged clitoris now extended below her vulva, and it chafed and rubbed painfully in her jeans. I advised her to get the kind of compression undergarments worn by biological men who dress to pass as female. At the end of the call, I thought to myself, wow, we hurt this kid. There are rare conditions in which babies are born with atypical genitalia, cases that call for sophisticated care and compassion, but clinics like the one where I worked are creating a whole cohort of kids with atypical genitals, and most of these teens haven't even had sex yet. They had no idea who they were going to be as adults, yet all it took for them to permanently transform themselves was one or two short conversations with a therapist. Being put on powerful doses of testosterone or estrogen, enough to try to trick your body into mimicking the opposite sex, affects the rest of the body. I doubt that any parent who's ever consented to give their kid testosterone, a lifelong treatment, knows that they're also possibly signing their kid up for blood pressure medication, cholesterol medication, and perhaps sleep apnea and diabetes. But sometimes the parents' understanding of what they had agreed to do to their children came forcefully. Please be advised that I'm revoking my consent for this course of medical treatment. Grades have dropped. There have been an inpatient behavioral health visit, and now he's on 5 different medications: Lexapro, Trazodone, Buspar, etc., etc. Blank is a shell of his former self, riddled with anxiety. Who knows if it's because the hormone blockers or the other medications? I revoke my consent. I want the hormone blocker removed. Thank you. Yeah, so some very tragic stuff here. Besides teenage girls, another group was referred to us: young people from the inpatient psychiatric unit or the emergency department of St. Louis Children's Hospital. The mental health of these kids was deeply concerning. There were diagnoses like schizophrenia, PTSD, bipolar disorder, and more. Often they were already on a fistful of pharmaceuticals. This was tragic, but unsurprising given the profound trauma some had been through. Yet, no matter how much suffering or pain a child had endured, or how little treatment and love they had received, our doctors viewed gendered transition, even with all the expense and hardship it entailed, as the solution. Some weeks it felt as though almost our entire caseload was nothing but disturbed young people. For example, one teenager came to us in the summer of 2022 when he was 17 years old and living in a lockdown facility because he had been sexually abusing dogs. He had an awful childhood. His mother was a drug addict, his father was imprisoned, and he grew up in foster care. Whatever treatment he may have been getting, it wasn't working. During our intake, I learned from another caseworker that when he got out, he planned to reoffend because he believed dogs had willingly submitted. Somewhere along the way, he expressed a desire to become female, so he ended up being seen at our center. I'm um, just going to note that disturb people that they treat, and I don't know how they release them back into the wild or whatever, but can you imagine the in their locker rooms and other places, and um thinking that their story is like this. Now you can be a female, and crazy female people show up in your locker room, but there is a strength difference between male and female, and um, they're treating some deeply disturbed people. This is really crazy. Um, from there, he went on to a psychologist at the hospital who was known for to approve virtually everyone seeking transition. Then our doctor recommended feminizing hormones. At the time, I wondered if this was being done as a form of chemical castration. That same thought came up again with another case. This one was in spring of 2022 and concerned a young man who had intense obsessive compulsive disorder that manifested as a desire to cut off his penis after he masturbated. This patient expressed no gender dysphoria, but he got hormone. I asked the doctor what protocol he was following, but I never got a straight answer. Another disturbing aspect of the center was its lack of regard for the rights of parents and the extent to which doctors saw themselves as more informed decision makers over the fate of these children. In Missouri, only one parent, and this is getting to like I've heard stories of this before. I've reported stories like this before. This is something that people need to be concerned about when there's people in like higher sort of authorities or whatever that believe that they have more say over your kids, want control over your kids, and this particular ideology will use to pry you from your kids. So we'll keep reading. In Missouri, only one parent's consent is required for treatment of their child. But when there was a dispute between the parents, it seemed the center always took the side of the affirming parent. My concerns about this approach to dissenting parents grew in 2019 when one of our doctors actually testified in a custody hearing against a father who opposed a mother's wish to start their on puberty blockers. I had done the original intake call, and I found the mother quite disturbing. She and the father were getting divorced, and the mother described the daughter as kind of a tomboy. So now the mother was convinced her child was trans. But when I asked her if her daughter had adopted a boy's name, if she was distressed about her body, if she was saying she felt like a boy, the mother said no. I explained the girl just didn't meet the criteria. A month later, the mother called back and said her daughter now used a boy's name, was in distress over her body, and wanted to transition. This time, the mom and daughter were given an appointment. Our providers decided the girl was trans and prescribed a puberty blocker to prevent her from her normal development. The father adamantly disagreed, said this was all coming from the mother, and a custody battle ensued after the hearing where our doctor testified in favor of transition. The judge sided with the mother. And here's an email from Jamie. I was not having any issues interpreting or understanding the elements that she on below, looking for the bigger question about how consent is now being determined. My concerns are that the judge is essentially removing the element of parental consent and placing it in our hands. The judge could have awarded the medical decision making to the dad or awarded legal custody to the dad. Instead, the judge put in the center's hands the decision making for medical transition, and this is a patient who is not yet 16. So if anyone's been following me for a while, you know I'm from Michigan, and we had an election that did not go well for us at all. Like Florida banger for Republicans. It was a wipeout for us, but we had a ballot initiative, and it was really worded deceptively. I knew, and I was telling people, if people aren't aware of this before the ballot, like they go vote, they're going to vote for this. but if we can inform them prior, then we can stop this. So people started to, so the gist of it was that it gives every individual, doesn't say woman, every individual, and it doesn't specify the age, the rights to all matters regarding pregnancy. It was called Reproductive Freedom for All Act, and they listed so much. They listed abortion, they listed miscarriage management, but they also listed different stuff that could they listed sterilization, but they said it's not limited to the things that they listed. So there's more things that they just didn't list. So it changes our constitution. So we have not limited. So there's a very open door with what could be involved, anything related to matters related to pregnancy. And it was really concerning too, because I'm like, how do you get pregnant? How do you get pregnant? Like, let's think about it for a second, and then I'll answer the question. The answer is sex. You get pregnant with sex. So if it's all matters relating to pregnancy, how is not also relating to sex? So there's nothing in the constitutional amendment, and it has passed now, about needing parental consent regarding any of the stuff. And it does say that you can make laws regarding this stuff, but it has to meet 3 different criteria, and one of them is that it can't infringe on the individual's autonomous decision making. So that basically wipes out, or could wipe out, just about any law. It has to be aligned with medical standards, and I can't remember the other one off the top of my head, but well, basically those, with the one you could wipe up most stuff. But if you have a really woke standards, like standards set by who? These different transgender organizations, these clinics that are butchering these kids, these standards of Planned Parenthood, who've been working for a long time to get rid of parental consent. They already tried to pass 2 bills. The Democrats in the House already tried to pass 2 bills to strip parents of their parental rights. If you go to the ACLU's website or Planned Parenthood advocacy group of Michigan or whatever it is, they tell you that they don't want parental consent for children when they get things like abortion. They think it's safer for the children to be able to act privately. And when people are like, this is going to lead to stuff happening without parental consent, they're like, that's not true. That's not true. They even brought the prosecutor of Detroit, Genesee, and Flint to be like, they're lying about Proposal 3. And they were lying, which I tried to follow up and question them. They did. They would not get back with me, because I did challenge them on it. And I did videos addressing it, debunking it, going through the law. There's other, like, people who are far better versed in the law than I am, who laid it out very well. So people are like, well, there's other laws on the books. On the ballot, it literally says, on the ballot that any conflicting law will be overwritten or cited or whatever. So, but it didn't even tell you that the right was for every individual on the ballot. So it was really disgusting what happened. It did pass. Unfortunately, I'm afraid that there's probably going to be a lot of people harmed before something like that gets overturned. People want darkness, they get darkness. So I was really concerned in telling different stories about parents who lost custody of their children over gender identity stuff, because, and not just conservative right-wing parents, like left-wing parents have lost custodies of their daughter. There was one woman from Illinois, and she's a feminist, she's left-wing. Her husband she had custody of her daughter. She had custody, and she had her daughter go over for a visit. And then the next thing she knows, it's like, oh, she can't come back home with you. You're an unsafe. And her daughter, she wasn't really trans or wasn't really expressing stuff. And she's very feminine. But her ex-husband married somebody who was into like psychotherapy. And they said a lot of the stuff was coming from, the new mom. And next thing you know, she lost custody of her daughter, and she can only write her letters. She can't even like call her. So it's a very tragic story. And I'm concerned. I'm concerned that that stuff can continue to explode in Michigan, especially since they just changed our constitution. If we don't open our eyes and scream to the rooftops about some of this craziness going on. So I'm very glad that the story came out. When people are like, mind your business about a lot of this like transgender ideology, there's a lot of people who want to just be left alone and live their life, and there's people who want to start like a cultural revolutions, and they and then our society raises them up, and then people see people like Ellen Page, and they're like, oh, she came out and she's been like, I'm like that too, and it just spreads from one person to another. This is not like a natural phenomenon in nature. And according to this case, it sounds like this is something a parent pressed so they could win custody of their kid. How much of a psychotic narcissist do you have to be to put your child in that much and to cause that harm to a father? Like, you two were married once upon a time. I don't know what kind of falling out they had, but this uh, because I was the main intake person, I had the broadest perspective on our existing and prospective patients. In 2019, a new group of people appeared on my radar: desisters and detransitioners. Desisters chose not to go through with the transition. Detransitioners are transgender people who decide to return to their birth gender. The one colleague with whom I was able to share my concerns agreed with me that we should be tracking desistance and detransition. We thought the doctors would want to collect and understand this data in order to figure out what they had missed. We were wrong. One doctor wondered aloud, spend time on someone who was no longer his patient. But we created a document anyway and called it the red flag list. It was an Excel spreadsheet that tracked the kind of patients that kept my colleague and me up at night. One of the saddest cases of detransition I witnessed was a teenage girl who, like so many of us, came from an unstable family, was in an uncertain living situation, and had drug use. The overwhelming majority of our patients are white, which I guess I figured that, but this girl was black. She was put on hormones at the center when she was around 16. When she was 18, she went in for a double mastectomy, what's known as top surgery. 3 months later, she called the surgeon's office to say she was going back to her birth name and that her pronouns were she and her. Heartbreakingly, she told the nurse, "I want my breasts back." The surgeon's office contacted our office because they didn't know what to say to this girl. My colleague and I said that we would reach out. It took a while to track her down, and when we did, we made sure that she was in decent mental health, that she was not actively suicidal, that she was not using substances. The last I heard, she was pregnant. Of course, she'll never be able to breastfeed her child. My concerns about what was going on at the center started to overtake my life. By spring of 2020, I felt a medical and moral obligation to do something. So I spoke up in the office and sent plenty of emails. So God bless her, at least for this. Here's just one example. On January 6, 2022, I received an email from a staff therapist asking me for help with a case of a 16-year-old transgender male living in another state. Parents are open to having patients see a therapist, but are not supportive of gender, and patient does not want parents to be aware of gender identity. I am having a challenging time finding a gender affirming therapist. I replied, I do not ethically agree with linking a minor patient to a therapist who would be gender affirming with gender as a focus of their work without that being discussed with the parents and the parent agreeing to that kind of care. In all my years at the Washington University School of Medicine, I had received solidly positive performance reviews. But in 2021, that changed. I got a below average mark for my judgment and working relationships slash cooperative spirit. Although I was described as responsible, conscientious, hardworking, and productive, the evaluation also noted at times Jamie responds poorly to direction from management with defensiveness and hostility. Things came to a head at a half-day retreat in summer of 2022. In front of the team, the doctor said that my colleague and I had to stop questioning the medicine and the science as well as their authority. Then an administrator told us we had to get on board or get out. It became clear that the purpose of the retreat was to deliver these messages to us. Can you imagine going on like a retreat and it's just a struggle session targeted at you? The Washington University, and by the way, I want to note and just put things in perspective. I don't know how everyone feels about the pandemic and stuff that's happened, but I'm sure you guys recall because you're alive, you're watching, the sort of pressure that was on people: comply or you're killing my grandma, comply, you're killing all these people if you don't comply. That there was a psychology behind it, and people felt like they had to bully other people and were empowered to bully other people. You know, there was such pressure associated with everything. There was a reporter today that came out about masks weren't as effective than as they were letting on, which I won't comment more than that, but because I want this to stay up. But um, there's there's just such pressure with so many different things. And like there's pressure. I was thinking earlier today about the pressure that people had during 2020 after George Floyd died, and BLM, and how people put it up in the profile, how people gave all this money to Black Lives Matter, how people changed their profile to a black square. I never did any of that stuff. I felt like I was living in the twilight zone, and there were so few people willing to just try to keep things in perspective and let the world be normal. I mean, people, like, there was one woman who told me, like, I was complaining about black neighborhoods being burned down, and they told me that was like acceptable collateral damage. And then I like was like, what? And then she ended up deleting her post, and then she messaged me, and this is a white person talking to me, and she apologized, not because what she said was like totally like evil, but because she realized as a white person she just didn't she didn't have the place to speak about what she was saying. And I was like, sweetheart, I want you to be able to speak, but like I just want you to realize, I just want to get some perspective on what you're saying. Like I'm challenging you not because you're white, I'm challenging you because you're wrong. And but I don't want you to not speak, especially just because you're white. I'm like, that's not what I want. But she didn't reply back. I suppose she was really embarrassed or whatever. But the people are afraid to be calling racist. People are afraid from all sorts of different pressures. And people are afraid today to be called homophobic. People are afraid to be called transphobe or whatever. So imagine the sort of pressures that are going on in these medical industries with people who just want them to shut up and go forward. When you start doing like the psychological damage, especially when they also throw at you, you have to affirm, or they're going to kill themselves. That's what they say. They're going to unalive themselves. That's what they say. So there's all this emotional blackmail into these professions. So when people bring up the stuff, you got to know that there's a game that so many people are playing, experimenting on these kids. Like as I'm reading this, I'm thinking about like the Tuskegee experiments, and I'm like, you got to be careful about people who say they care about you, people who are treating you like you got to be so careful about stuff. And they're experimenting on these kids and young women, whether it's for ideology or profit or politics, whatever the reason, it's wrong. The Washington University system provides a generous college tuition payment program for longstanding employees. I live by my paycheck, and I have no money to put aside for 5 college tuitions for my kids. I had to keep my job. I also feel a lot of loyalty to Washington University, but I decided then that I had to get out of Transgender Center, and to do so, I had to keep my head down and improve my next performance review. I managed to get a decent evaluation, and I landed a job conducting research in another part of the Washington University School of Medicine. I gave my notice and left the Transgender Center in November of 2022. For a couple of weeks, I tried to put everything behind me and settle into my new job as a clinical research coordinator, managing studies regarding children undergoing bone marrow transplants. Then I came across comments from Dr. Rachel Levine, a transgender woman who is a high official at the Federal Department of Health and Human Services. The article read, Levine U.S. Assistant Health Secretary of Health, said that clinics are proceeding carefully and that no American children are receiving drugs or hormones for gender dysphoria who shouldn't. I felt stunned and sickened. It wasn't true. And I know that from deep firsthand experience. So I started writing down everything I could about my experience at the Transgender Center 2 weeks ago. I brought my concerns and documents to the attention of Missouri's Attorney General. He is a Republican. I am a progressive. But the safety of children should not be a matter for our culture wars. Given the secrecy and lack of rigorous standards that characterize youth gender transition across the country, I believe that to ensure the safety of American children, we need a moratorium on the hormonal and surgical treatment of young people with gender dysphoria. In the past 15 years, according to Reuters, the US has gone from having no pediatric gender clinics to more than 100. A thorough analysis should be undertaken to find out what has been done to their patients and why, and what the long term consequences are. There is a clear path for us to follow. Just last year, England announced that it would close the Travis Stocks Youth Gender Clinic and the NHS's only such clinic in the country after an investigation revealed shoddy practices and poor patient treatment. Sweden and Finland, too, have investigated pediatric transition and greatly curbed the practice, finding there is insufficient evidence of help and danger of great harm. Some critics describe the kind of treatment offered at places like the Transgender Center where I worked as a kind of national experiment, but that's wrong. Experiments are supposed to be carefully designed. Hypotheses are supposed to be tested ethically. The doctors I worked alongside at the Transgender Center said frequently about the treatment of our patients. We are building the plane while we are flying it. No one should be a passenger on that kind of aircraft. And that's the end. So as I noted earlier, Rachel Levine, who's the Assistant Health Secretary, U.S. Assistant Health Secretary, who by the way is a diversity hire, just is. I don't know why you would hire him after COVID, what he did in his state, but he ended up being the Assistant Health Secretary, so they could say, "Oh, our first transgender person we elevated to this place." That was the goal of that. And Becerra, who's a health secretary, he doesn't have the background to have the job that he has. The most prominent thing that he's done is sue the Little Sisters of the Poor. Or people will say, well, he didn't directly sue the nuns. He sued the Trump administration. Yeah, but the Trump administration was protecting the Little Sisters of the Poor. So yeah, he sued the nuns. So he shouldn't have that position. And Levin shouldn't have the position. And Levin is the person who Babylon B did an article calling him Man of the Year, and then Twitter locked out their account. And then they're like, well, we're not deleting it, because they're like, you have to delete it and you can get your account back. And they're like, it's true. So we're not, he's a man and we're not deleting it. So they didn't delete it. And Elon Musk didn't like that they locked their account. And that's why Elon Musk, I don't know what all contributed to it, but that started the avalanche of Elon Musk eventually owning Twitter. So yeah, wild stuff. So we don't know what all is happening across the country at these different clinics. I'm very grateful for this article that she was willing to write this. There's so many people who are not okay, who are so deep in this ideology, and they get treated so fast. So fast. Detransitioners talk about how they have like a 30-minute conversation with Planned Parenthood and then they can get hormones. So people are not putting a lot of care into these people. Gender dysphoria, it's not it is a trend, I guess, but people keep elevating and talking about it because they're like, well, these people shouldn't be marginalized or treated. I don't want anyone treated poorly or anything like that. I don't. But there's some things that you gatekeep, and there's a huge element of social contagion here. there's a huge element of social contagion. We wouldn't uplift anorexia or things like that to be like, this is a wonderful thing, celebrate these people going through this thing. We should not treat people poorly who go through those sorts of things, and let, as a society, be there for them as we comfort them and try to help them get right with their mind and their body. But to act like, I don't know, this is some kind of moral heroic thing, whether it's Dylan Mulvaney or Leah Thomas or something, uplifting them, even to the point where uplifting them and their needs and their feelings above women, it it's just beyond me. It's just really insane. And ideology, money, and politics. Politics plays a huge part of it. But there's some individuals who are really really shady with how they're using their dysphoria to gain attention, etc. But as a society as a whole, like these big levers of power that keep elevating it, as if it's this glorious stunning thing that's contributing to the contagion, because people don't have to go to the dark deep corners of Reddit or Tumblr rather to be radicalized in this. They can just turn on their TV. And if you say anything like, no, I'm not cis, I'm just a woman, I'm not a chest feeder, people get mad at you. I heard someone today say, just be an ally. Like, it's not a big deal what woman is. And I'm like, what? And they're like, you should be able to empathize that they want their own space and we should have their own space. They're like, just be an ally. And I'm like, I can't be an ally to an ideology that is adversarial to the truth. I can't, like, I can advocate for people that they get treatment and proper treatment and help and sympathy and care, and that their rights aren't violated, like real rights, not privileges that they feel that they're entitled to. I can do those things, but if allyship means that I have to somehow accept that being a man or a woman is interchangeable, then I can't do that. Like, people say, no, they're not trying to take womanhood away from you. I think to a degree they are trying. That's something that you can't do. I'll always be a woman. There's something, you can't take that away, But at the same time, if you're trying to say that there's not male and female, that you can become one or the other, especially based off of belief, then how does that not diminish what men and women are if they are so easily interchangeable? And to me, it seems pretty obvious that people don't want to really have a third category. Maybe some people do, but like in the What Is a Woman documentary, what Matt Walsh went to one, transgender person, doctor, and he's like, I am a woman, and he didn't even consider himself as trans. He's like, I live my life as a woman. I am a woman, and there'd be people be like, well, you need to respect that. Like, well, I mean, he's a man though. Like, he's had surgery, and lives how he wants to live, wears the clothes, etc. But he's still not a woman, And if someone passes and has presented themselves in a way that you wouldn't be able to tell, I guess congrats to them. But if you expect everyone to just accept like they're interchangeable, I can't do that. I can't do that. So I can't be an ally in that sort of way. And I don't think anyone else should. I don't think I think we need to have a hard 180-degree turn from this ideology. And I'm sure I'm into some stuff that's way harder than the author of the article, because she said that she's married to a trans man, so she's a lesbian, so she's understands that ideology and accepts it and stuff. But and I'm not denying anyone has gender dysphoria. People obviously have gender dysphoria, but I don't think we should do the respecting people's pronouns or something. I think we got to say, look, this is truth, this is reality, and it's worth fighting for, because look how it has evolved into the harm. I'm very grateful to everybody who's willing to ally in the position of helping kids and young women. And by the way, even it's not just minors who are like in danger of this. as I mentioned hysterectomies earlier, like they won't just give that to young women. I guess you can find someone to do it, but it's not like typical. Like there's plenty of doctors who don't like to do it because they don't, because of repercussions that can happen with women physically, and also they might want a baby. They might regret it. So if we pause with women doing that, then why are we doing this to kids or young women like in their who are 18, 19, 20, your brain is it doesn't stop developing into your 20s. If I see really bad takes in my comments on TikTok, I'm like, this person is between the ages of 15 and 21 or 20. Sometimes I go up to 23. I'm like, but I can usually nail their age. I'm like, this person's like 17. And I go to their profile. I'm like, yep, I knew it. And I'm not saying all kids were dumb. I would, I mean, I don't like, I bet I have better takes than I did as a kid, but I definitely had better takes than the kids that I see today. So I'm not saying every kid has a bad take, but I'm usually right. I'm usually right. So why when a child says, "Hey, I would like you to give me hormones to chop off my bosoms," that we just go along with that, like that's normal, like that's okay, like they're totally rational enough to make that decision, that they understand the real world problems that will happen as a result of that. That's insane. The person who worked with Sam Smith, was it Petra or something? I don't know. But for the song Unholy, everyone's talking about the performance or whatever, but he had him accept the award, and because they wanted a transgender person to be like, I'm the first transgender person to win this award and stuff. And Matt Walsh pointed out, like, this people say that they don't have these big surgeries on minors. And granted, I don't believe this person is American, but like this person had surgery when they were 16. So Matt Walsh was pointing out this thing, like this happens to kids, and then people start attacking Matt Walsh, like, but she's happy, she's happy. That's what Oh, well, just admit that he's right. Just admit that he's right. Admit that he has a point. You can say, well, you have a point, but we believe that they should. Let's just be frank. Let's be for real. Like if you believe that minors should be able to do this stuff, and frankly, there's a lot of people who do. There's people who believe that parents are obstacles, that the kids are dollar signs, and the parents just need to be pushed out of it. They prefer the kids were just, wards of the state anyway, with education, all sorts of stuff. There are people who want this done to kids. So I am grateful to everyone, regardless of if you share my political worldview, if you're willing to fight side by side with this issue, especially knowing that I'm going to go further than where you're going to go. But I very much appreciate you meeting me in the middle, at least with stop doing this to young kids and young adults. I don't know how everybody feels about the young adults. And then you'll see these heartbreaking stories of people who are detransitioners pouring out their hearts. And there are people who be like, well, you're an adult. So you were an adult when you made that choice and you have to live with it. Yeah, obviously, they have to live with it. But to pretend like there wasn't some sort of, there wasn't propaganda and malpractice and other things done to them, that somebody should be held accountable as well. That's ridiculous. That's ridiculous. So grateful for this article. I'm about to hit my hour mark, but I want to at least talk about this train a little bit, because it is a very unreported story. In Ohio, there was a massive derailing of a train, and there was like 50 cars that were turned over. So there's some articles about it, but everyone's talking about how little people are talking about it. And I tried to look up stuff from Pete Buttigieg, who's their Secretary of Transportation. I didn't see anything in his Twitter feed. I went to the website, didn't see anything in the news about it. I didn't see any snippets or clips of him in the news talking about it. Maybe I've missed it. I'm not saying he hasn't been really addressing it or anything like that. I just couldn't find anything, and I did look. Not trying to, but I'm leaving the door open to that I'm wrong. because this is a major thing that happened. But if you didn't see anything, here's just some footage. So that's some of the burning from far away. So there is a reporter who was arrested. Now Governor DeWine said that they should not have done that. This is a national news reporter who was trying to report on more things, and they ended up arresting him. Um, so that's fueled suspicion about all sorts of stuff going on. But here's him being arrested.
Lay flat, please. You guys, he's a national correspondent. You cannot do this.
I'm a reporter with News Nation. It's all being recorded right now.
I hope it is. This is horrible.
Because you can't talk to people about doing their jobs.
Oh my God, I cannot believe this.
With that.
This is horrible.
This is what it's like to be a black reporter in 2023.
Evan, I'm so sorry. Evan, I'm sorry.
Thank you, Sia.
Roll over, sir. You don't want your butt.
Can you please listen to this?
So again, the governor said that they should not have acted in the way. I think they like justified them doing it, but he said they shouldn't have done that. But there was a lot of chemicals on the train, and they had to do a controlled burn of the chemicals. And if they didn't do a controlled burn, I guess it would have just exploded. So they did a controlled burn, and they had to evacuate everything within a mile radius. So here's a bit of what the controlled burn looked like. Yeah, so this is a crazy story. So apparently train derailments, they don't usually make the news, but the Washington Post reported that they happen like there's 1,000 derailments like every year. There are some union organizations that are saying, hey, we tried to warn you about different things. Like we wanted more workers, more hours, and also safer conditions, and things like this happen when you don't get more employees. And we wanted and you're trying to cut corners, but when you cut corners financially, you end up making more hazards like this. So there's definitely some people going that route. Washington Post reported because people are asking what the different health risks are from them burning these chemicals, and this spill or controlled burn and the derailment of like the 50 cars. The health risk of Ohioans after derailment of train with toxic chemicals. Got to zoom in a little bit so I can read this where I'm at. A train derailment near Ohio-Pennsylvania border last Friday has forced residents living nearby to evacuate their homes for fear they could be injured or even killed by exposure to the toxic chemicals and some of the rail cars. There's trains like, I'm not like an earshot of a train. I used to live like right behind a train in the street that I grew up on, but they're not like far. So this I don't know. This seems disturbing to me. Disturbing to me. I was like on the border of Pennsylvania, Ohio not too long ago. I guess I don't know specifically in relations to the map or where this was to where I was driving not too long ago, but it's just eerie knowing that this stuff happens more often than not, and it's not often talked about. Afraid that some of these cars might explode, the authorities have been releasing and burning chemicals, raising questions about what might happen if they leach into the environment, and risk that residents and first responders face if they inhale the fumes. What do we know about the release and just how dangerous are these chemicals? There's reason evacuations have been ordered for the communities near this site. This is toxic stuff, which there have been like citizens like concerned about going back. The Washington Post and other news outlets have reported that 5 of the derailed tanker cars were carrying vinyl chloride, a hazardous odorless chemical that's mostly used in the United States in the manufacturing of plastics. It turns up in everyday items such as packaging materials, housewares, and wires and cable coatings. Vinyl chloride is a cancerogen that has been linked to increased. I think it said increased instead of like more like crease in your pants, but I guess I'm kind of saying it right. Increased risk of liver cancer. The Centers for Disease and Control and Prevention warns that breathing vinyl chloride over long periods may be connected to brain cancer, lung cancers, and some cancers of the blood. But much of what we know about how this chemical affects people is from studies of workers who've breathed in for long stretches of time. It's less understood how a sudden release, such as the one in Ohio, could affect people living nearby, or how the authorities' decision to burn off the vinyl chloride might affect its dispersal. But it's something they felt like they had to do, or boom. Short-term exposure to the high levels can cause dizziness, drowsiness, fatigue, and headaches. Maria Doa, the senior director of chemicals policy at the Environmental Defense Fund, said in an email. The Environmental Protection Agency says it's monitoring 2 other chemicals, phosphagen and hydrogen peroxide, that may be released into the air by the controlled burn. Neither of these are good news either. Phosphagen was used as a weapon in World War I and is highly toxic gas that can lead to choking, chest constriction, and in the most acute exposures, possibly even death. So yeah, there's some concerns going on to the people around how it may spread, how far the spread will be. Like, is it gonna start hitting any sort of Great Lakes, or just concerns that people have. And I wonder how this is buzzing locally, because on Twitter there's lots of conversations about how people aren't having conversations about it. And so I just wanted to mention and keep it on the radar. So it's something that we'll look into, but I definitely wanted to mention it before the weekend passed. So and there's a ton of people who just like weren't aware of the story. I talked to someone about it, and then they started spewing out all these conspiracy theories, and I couldn't follow them on all of them, but there's kind of like, what else was in that train? And mentioned the movie Super 8, and I'm like, I'm not saying there was aliens. And they don't mean that it was aliens, but I'm just like, well, what do you think was there or wasn't there? Or she's like, there's a reason why they needed to evacuate. I'm like, okay, who knows? But sounds like a lot of TV. Anyway, that's for the stories. I'm going to go ahead and mention the pop culture thing that I said I would get to if I had time. I'm over my time, but I'm going to go ahead and mention it. Rebecca Black, if anyone remembers Rebecca Black, she did the Friday song. So she had posted that she released her album 12 years ago. And that's pretty crazy. That is pretty darn crazy. So if you don't recall, Friday, because I had made a post about it and some people didn't know what it was or didn't understand the controversy. There was no controversy. Like, for real, there was no controversy, but she became like the most hated person in America. And she trended for days on Twitter over a song. She was just a child. And they hated her in this song so much. And it wasn't like it was the worst song. It was like it was a bad song. And then it became a bad song that was so bad it became good. Like, it never good, but people's like, I know someone who plays the song every Friday. And someone had said that they still play it. I'm sure this was a joke, but they were like, I still don't know whether to get in the front seat or the back seat. So if you don't know what it is, I'm gonna play a snippet of Friday, just to go down memory lane a bit. But if you don't remember, here it is.
partying. Fun, 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 fun. Looking forward to the weekend. Have her driving on the highway, cruising so fast.
Yeah, we'll stop there. But yeah, that was a huge song. It was trending for days, and it was just a kid who worked with some studio. Their family paid or whatever. They got a song. They did a music video, and people hated it. They despised it. Again, and she was trending for days. And people weren't just talking about how bad the song. Like they're bullying the girl. Like it was real bullying to this girl. I'm like, what? I didn't understand that level of hatred that people seem to have. Like, she was genuinely bullied for the song. Genuinely bullying it. I'm not saying that for like snowflakes, people just complain about stuff. She was bullied, like cyber bullied for this song. And she was just a kid. She was just a kid. But I get since then, she's grown from it. She's a YouTuber now. So she started making stuff. She actually, even if you're not aware, she actually even did a follow-up to Friday. Now, if you can't guess what it's called, then you didn't watch the video and get to the point where they sang about the calendar. So you knew the days. But yeah, she actually released a song called Saturday, which I didn't think was too bad. Party all night. Yeah, so they made lots of references in this video to the Friday song, like she grabbed her bowl and it said "Gotta have my bowl," and there's like a black guy who breaks into the party at the end who's getting arrested. He's like, "Look, fast lane, switching lanes," and so he's like just yelling out the lyrics to the rap song. They had like a Miley Cyrus chick in there. It was a video poking a lot of fun at herself. But she also like was on So You Think You Can Dance, like premiered her video. I think they had people who were in the series on there. So she made a comeback, and pivoted from that disdain that people had from her, and was able to make something of herself. So I'm glad to see it, because they really did ruthlessly bully her. And for people, the Saturday song, she sounded fine enough, but she was on the 4 in 2018. So I mean, she can sing pretty well. She's no Whitney Houston, but she's just pretty good. So I just want to go ahead and play that for a second, because just in case you didn't know, Becca can she's doing stuff and she's okay. She's okay.
I thought I saw a man brought to life. He was warm, he came around like he was dignified. He showed me what it was to cry. Well, you couldn't beat that man I adore. You don't seem to know or seem to care what your heart is for. No, I don't know him anymore. There's something where we used to lie. Conversation has run by. Well, that's what's going on. And nothing's fine, I'm torn. I'm all out of bed. This is how I feel. Holding I am shamed. Lying naked on the floor. Illusions never change. Into something real. I'm wide awake and I can see the perfect day is torn. I'm all out of bed.
This is how I feel. Yeah, so I thought she did a pretty good job. She did not win her battle against James Graham, who went on to win, which I think he sang what song did he sing? I can't remember, but he like basically was great every performance. So yeah, I'm pretty sure they let her through the second round because they wanted to know what else she would do, and she's super famous. uh all about the bass. Megan Trainor, she recognized her. I don't think the rest of the judges really knew her story. And the sort of tr- terrible bullying that she went through. But her song did become like a cultural icon. You don't hear it as much now, but Friday was everywhere. I remember when I worked at Target, there was like um were they eggs or hamsters or something? It seemed like it was Easter related, and it would sing Friday. So there was stuff that kept popping off because of the song. Um, so it was a huge thing. Just kind of like one day you woke up and you heard Baby Shark everywhere. That's kind of like how Friday was. I'm not saying it was as in the burst of time that it was huge. It was a crazy phenomenon. I still think like Baby Shark is like bigger, but I haven't heard it in a long time. But maybe it's because my nieces and my nephew are older, but there is a baby. There is a baby. So maybe the age of Baby Shark will make a return in my life. But yeah, it was everywhere. So seems like she's some other stuff that looks a little more ratchet from some of the stuff that she got going on. I think a lot of the other stuff is kind of jokes, but I don't follow her YouTube page. I just thought it was a blast from the past kind of post, so I just wanted to share it. Anyway, thank you guys for joining me today. I hope you guys enjoyed. We talked about some really important stuff and some not so important stuff at the end, but yeah, the front half was important. I'm gonna clip that. I appreciate everyone watching it live. That does help my numbers, especially on YouTube. So thank you. God bless you. I will clip that portion, even though it's like majority of the episode, and go through the reading of it again, because in case there was any kind of internet connections or whatever, reposting it from the streaming site, it'll be clear. So I'll go ahead and do that. It's a very important story, very important that people know that these medical professionals have been playing games for whatever reasons, and we are out here hurting kids. I thought it was interesting. She said we can't even call it an experiment because experiments have like hypotheses and purposes, and they're just doing guesswork essentially. And it's unfortunate that someone's baby has to pay for that. Like someone's child has to pay for that. And don't tell me these. And if you go on TikTok, there's all these people who defend it so fiercely. There's people who want it pushed in schools so fiercely, and there's such evil going on to affirm and push out more people who do not have true gender dysphoria. So I'm glad that someone spoke out about it. If you like what I do here, please consider going to blacktnews.com, leaving a donation on the website. It costs a stream, costs to run my website, do all that good stuff. So if you can support, whether it's a gift of $10, $20, $50 more, I very much appreciate it. And I am asking, if you can do it, to go ahead and go that extra mile to take care of some of the overhead that I got going on. So thank you if you can. Otherwise, I thank you for liking, for sharing, subscribing. Just watching helps too. To be transparent, I'm not monetized on Facebook. The only way you can do anything on Facebook is if you give the stars. I'm not monetized on YouTube yet. I have no idea if they will monetize me when I'm able to apply for that. I have more than enough subscribers. I guess in a bit of time, maybe we can get there, but they do have to approve it still. I don't know that YouTube will. So just the goodness and graces of your hearts when you donate, or when people buy some stuff from the store. That's what I got going on as far as Black Tea, but I'd like to continue to grow Black Tea and be able to do it and expand some more to outside of myself, because editing the videos, putting everything together, writing articles, it's traveling, interviews, etc. It's me right now. So thank you for your support. Check out the store, pre-order my book, check out my other books that are just out on Amazon, and I'll give you the actual book website. You guys can do some reading over the weekend. ninjadustpublishing.com. If you just search my name, Christina L. Barr, on Amazon, I will pop up. And I have 15 books that are available that you can get. One is a faith book. The other books are, I got children's chapter books. I got historical fiction, fantasy, series. I have paranormal romance, story about demon hunters, vampires, and werewolves, and other kind of mermaids, and I got all kinds of stuff going on. I have a huge imagination. I don't, though just mentioned some mythical sort of things. I don't, and some books are darker than others. But I don't. My intention is never to glorify evil. You might have to go through a darkness to light sort of situation, but um, it's never a glorification of evil if anyone's concerned. So a lot of people ask if my stuff is appropriate for children. I mean, I guess it depends on the age and what you give to your kids. I can do a more in-depth video breakdown for which one, because I know people have asked from time to time. But but if you ask me about a specific book or something online, I can just answer the questions. But anyway, God bless you guys, and I'll see you on Monday.